Welcome to Commerce Media Matters, your go-to podcast for unpacking the world of commerce media. Here, we catch up with industry leaders on news, research, insights, perspectives, and everything in between.
Hi, I'm Paul, Director of Commercial Data and E-commerce at News Corp Australia.
Hi, I'm Nick, founder and CEO at Voodoo. Today we have media royalty Joshua Lowcock from Quad Media in the spotlight. Joshua is a true heavyweight in digital media, marketing and technology. As a respected board member and non-executive director, he has worked with 3 of the Fortune 10, with experience across Australia, China and the US. His expertise has earned him a place in Adweek 50 as an indispensable player in media, marketing and tech. Welcome, Joshua. So great to have you on board today.
It's great to be here. I wouldn't say that I'm media royalty, but I'm still happy to be here.
We've been trying to do this for a little while. So much going on. You've been in Cannes. We've been at Cannes. So we're really happy to have you on board. So I appreciate it. I just want to get into a couple of things. So, and specifically you. So you're currently the president of media at Quad, a global marketing company that helps brands such as Walmart and Homeland make trusted consumer connections across household, in-store and online with marketing experience solutions. Can you tell us more about that? Because Quad, obviously, here in the Australian market, Southern Hemisphere, is not as prevalent and it's really big in the US. Could you tell us a bit more about Quad?
Yeah, happy to do that. So I'll always start by saying Quad, we're publicly listed on the New York Stock Exchange. We have, several lines of business. Quad is at its core and at its heart, a maker manufacturing company. We do a lot of print production work across all types of print, whether that's signage, packaging, magazines, books, in-store display units. We also have a media agency business, which I oversee. The media agency business is called Rise. We also have a creative agency called Betty. We're not a holding company. It's very important to me to stress that we're not a holding company because we have the value, ethics and morals that are not represented by holding companies. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, we're there to do 2 things. We're there to make the experience for marketers better by providing a full suite of solutions. The other one is we're there to actually help brands reach their customers more efficiently in any media channel that they need.
Josh, you've held roles at some of the big holdcos and you seem very passionate about the difference between, an independent approach versus the holdcos. What's driven you to really focus in on Quad's ethics, I think you mentioned before?
Yeah, so, Quad's values are what attracted me to the company. The key thing is at Quad, we put clients first, which sounds like a no-brainer of of course, why wouldn't you put clients first? But holding companies are challenged because they're stuck in an operating and financial model, which means they make business decisions to put their own interests ahead of clients. And that ultimately is not good for the marketer. It's not good for brands. And it's not good for the industry as a whole, where you want to drive competition and smart decisions about where you invest your money. At the end of the day, at Quad, what we do is we invest our clients' budgets in the areas that make the best sense for the client, not what suits our own financial interests.
How would you apply that thinking in regards to, say, emerging technologies, which is fantastic? That would obviously guide the business's decision around innovation and what they should be leaning into for their customers, right?
Yeah, so that drives the way we think about innovation. That's one of the reasons why we're launching a product called In-Store Connect, which is an in-store retail media network, where we're literally bankrolling the deployment of that and building a category ourselves. Again, we're trying to identify those opportunities that they're the smart places to play, and clients want innovation. They don't want to be beholden to spending money just with 2 or 3 sort of key players. So we're always looking for either the new channel, the new environment, or the new way to make a meaningful connection to a customer that will drive business results, ultimately sales for a client.
You're taking it to market soon, right?
Yeah, so Quad In-Store Connect, we are taking that to market soon. We're in the middle of signing up retailers and rolling that out in the moment. In-Store Connect it's an in-store retail media network. So as you walk around the aisles in supermarket, you think of the end cap displays, so those front fixtures at the end of an aisle. Or if you walk down a supermarket aisle today, you might be familiar, the industry term is flags, but those sort of cardboard things that stick out in an aisle to attract your attention to a product or an offering.
Yeah.
we're upgrading all of those with digital screens and signage, very thin, low voltage, integrated in the brand experience and the retail experience. Because at the end of the day, 80% of consumer transactions still occur in physical retail environments. And all we're doing is we're upgrading those legacy, printed products with a modern digital alternative, which we will make available through, the normal programmatic channels. And the end goal of that is to help retailers, drive transactions, but also help brands reach consumers and drive people across the aisle. So we're all guilty of going into the store, you've got your list or you know what you need to buy, you go to aisle 3, you'll pick one product, and you won't go to aisle 6 and you'll never discover that ice cream's on sale and you've got a secret craving for chocolate ice cream. These things we can now market across the aisle, which we think is very important.
Really interesting. I mean, it's a massive booming space, the retail media space and the commerce media space more broadly. You mentioned being able to trade it programmatically. For me, with all these booming players in the retail media space, fragmentation becomes such a massive issue. So I guess programmatic, is that the way that you see it all coming together? And how do clients navigate this ecosystem now of all these different players that have got all these different opportunities in store, online, and in physical environments like their print catalogs, etc.?
Yeah, so it's a great question. There's sort of a multi-part answer to that. So the value and the In-Store Connect brings to the table is we're aggregating multiple retailers across the country to build a single programmatic network. If you think about, I'll call it legacy retail media, which is a funny phrase to say when digital retail media is sort of in its heyday, right?
Yeah, it's like traditional digital.
Yeah, like traditional digital, exactly.
Yeah.
But legacy retail media offerings are very siloed to a retailer, and they don't sort of answer that brand need of, it's like at the end of the day, and I used to work on CPG brands, both here in the US and China, is you don't retail through a single retailer. And so the problem for brands right now is in digital retail media networks that are online, they're having to divvy up their budget across, retailer A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And it doesn't leave them a lot of money left over to spend on, other media channels where they would historically spend money. And with Quad In-Store Connect, what we're doing is brands can aggregate a whole lot of other retailers together and buy in the US, let's say the Northeast region or the total United States. If they're launching a product in just a single retailer, we'll let them carve out and buy a single store. So it delivers on, In-Store Connect delivers on the promise of the way programmatic works in the digital world, but with the advantages of its quality inventory that's safe in an environment that you know is going to be seen by humans and without all the other fraud and problematic concerns, that you have in programmatic media.
And imagine, given that it's programmatic, you can also provide, really reliable measurement. Like you were talking about that just then, really, I think, weren't you? Is that marketers need to know where their dollar is working the hardest. And so that measurement piece seems to be the bit that everyone's trying to solve. Mixed market modeling is the trend of the day at the moment. And I guess, what we're seeing in the retail media space in Australia is that I guess it's very fragmented. So it sounds like you guys are starting to break down those silos and allow marketers to really see where they can perform best. Is there anyone else out there doing that aggregation role? Do you have other competitors out in that space?
No, I mean, the usual suspects are hinting that they want to get in the space, but Quad was really a first mover in the area. And again, Quad, corporately, we have a significant number of clients. And because we're on that manufacturing base, we're already printing in-store signage for a lot of retailers or cardboard fixtures and display units for a lot of retailers. We have all those relationships already. So we've got a bit of a head start on the rest of the industry who's trying to catch up.
Yeah. And what do you see the role of content bringing it all together? I think maybe retail media's got this fantastic opportunity to show how you can target that transaction level data and be close to the path of purchase. But for brands, how do they control the experience within those retail media networks? And what role does creativity play in the messaging that sits in those retail media networks?
So if you're talking about, and I'm going to laugh again, like traditional retail media networks,
Yep.
like not the in-store ones. I mean, my personal view is creativity is the future optimization metric of all media, because as we move to automation and AI and a lot of those optimization decisions are taken away from human beings, what's the last thing you can truly optimize towards? You can optimize your creative. My personal backstory and experience was in retail before I graduated what we in America call college, in Australia call university. But storytelling and merchandising is very, very important. And I think that's a key part of the creative side of things. So I think what gets a little bit lost in air quotes traditional retail media networks is that ability to have creative tell a story and really, romance the product, because not to be dismissive of creative, but, anyone can make an ad and put it in front of someone in, again, traditional retail media networks. When you're on a website and trying to make a decision about a product, what are you doing to actually romance the product and make it an easy decision to make? I think about on the Quad side of things, we have a creative agency called Betty. One of the things we did is we bought in the US, it's the first 3D product scanner. What that means is like you can put a shoe in there and it literally scans the product from all angles all at once. And then that product can be merchandised on a retail media network, but it can also be turned into an AR product that you can try on. That means people can shift it and try it with different lighting. Like, to me, that's part of the creative storytelling thing, which is where traditional retail media networks need to go further and where the industry as a whole needs to go further.
I love that line. Creativity. Well, can you repeat that line, or if you can again? Creativity is the last layer of optimization. Was it something to that effect?
Yeah, creativity is the last area that's going to be left to optimize.
I'm loving the way you talk about it and romancing the product and romancing the customer. I think that's a really apt way of describing what the creative is there to do, right?
Yeah.
The creative's job. And I think it's really interesting to talk about that creative part, because I know your background, you've had some storied experiences with working in retail media. How have you taken some of that experience and applied it to this particular project? Well, what are the strengths that you've brought forward? Is it the ability to see areas that you can optimize, like creative? Do you see other areas that you think that Quad can do better than what has been done in those traditional retail media? There's a few questions in that statement, obviously.
The perspective that I bring and that, Quad brings to the table that's different is we're interested in solving for both sides of the equation, which is what's in the best interest of the retailer and what's in the best interest of the brand. And a lot of traditional legacy retail media networks make the mistake that they have all this data, they'll use all this data, and you end up in this endless game of, conquesting. So, you try and get people to buy Coke to buy Pepsi, and you try and get people to buy Pepsi to buy Coke. And that's a zero-sum game. It doesn't help either of the brands, and it doesn't help the retailer, because all you're doing is share shifting in the basket. The way we're thinking about, in-store connect is, how do you bring people across the aisle? How do you actually help a customer discover products that they might not have seen because they're doing a short trip and they would be interested in something in another aisle? And actually, how do you help the retailer sell that incremental item, not share shift in a basket? There's just a lot of thought about what's in the best interest for both sides. And that, I think, makes us differentiated in the market. But I think more importantly, it's in the better interest of the consumer as well.
Yeah.
Because, one part of advertising, aside from to sell product, is to educate people about brands and offers and, new services that are available. And so when you approach it more about how can we actually service everyone, you actually start thinking about, well, if we're servicing everyone, what else does the customer want? The customer wants to be more familiar or aware of things that are going on as well.
They want to discover new products. They want to discover new services as well. They want someone to curate that. So, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be a podcast these days without discussing AI a little bit. With AI, helping to make those decisions. I think maybe the retail media networks and what you're saying there with helping them discover new products is a really interesting angle to take.
The concern I have about AI is you end up and it gets back to that creativity bit. You get to a race to the bottom on optimization. Like AI is great, and AI is only as good as the data that gets fed to it.
Yeah.
And what I worry about AI-led optimization is it hunts after the easiest audience, or it can be easily misled and, hallucinate what the best audience is. And so, I always think of AI as augmented intelligence, that's why you need humans involved in the conversation. And that's why, philosophically, I like Microsoft's branding of their AI product as a co-pilot, because I think that is more true to the value that AI can bring. It's great for accelerating decision making. It's great as a co-pilot in helping you get to a better decision, but it shouldn't be the ultimate arbitrator of the decision. Because also the other concern I have is, think about retail media networks. If I won't name a retailer because, I sit in every retailer's line of business. If a retailer is using the same AI algorithm to optimize for every brand advertising on its platform, no brand's going to win because everybody's optimizing using the same AI model. There's no differentiation. That's why humans need to be involved to tweak the algorithm and eke out that better result.
So you're saying there's still a role for creatives and content creators.
And I'm going to say media planners and strategists.
Fantastic.
Great. They'll be happy to hear that.
Terminator isn't taking us over just yet. Speaking of data, and I know it's a topic close to your heart, and given you are aggregating across several retailers and retail media networks, how important is data privacy and those things in the model that you're creating with Quad?
For me, if you step back from my roles and responsibilities at Quad and just talk about me as a private individual, I'm a firm advocate for data privacy, user control, and consent. Parallel to that, in my role at Quad's aligned that data privacy is very important, and we have systems and processes in place to manage for that. There's part one, which is compliance with local laws and regulations, and in the US we have, and I'm going to say this slowly, we have the misfortune of multiple state-based regulations, and I call it a misfortune because it adds unnecessary complexity because we don't have a federal law, and I would dearly love a federal law because navigating regional complexities is not in the best interest of anyone, and especially as someone who travels all the time. The state that I live in the US, we have a privacy law. When I'm outside the state, I'm always then having to explain to services I'm doing business with, I'm protected by the privacy law of the state I live in, even though the state I'm traveling to might not have one. So that's why we need a federal law. But all of our decisions are made on the basis that at the end of the day, users need to be given control and permission, and data needs to be used in a way that both respects the spirit and intent of regulations, but also sets a bar of what is, acceptable behavior. Listen to the laws currently are lagging consumer sentiment, so we listen to what consumer sentiment is and try and lean into consumer expectations and sentiment.
And do you think, the basis of the success of some of these retail media networks is that data propositions, understanding customer intent towards a product. Do you think consumers know how much data they're handing over? Do you think that the retail media networks could be doing a better job at educating the consumer on how that data is actually being used? These big rewards programs, those sorts of things. It could be quite scary to see how much data they're collecting.
I think for consumers who are, members or participants in a loyalty program and that retailer has a retail media network, I think there's a better understanding by people that in exchange for, the loyalty points or, collecting points to get cash back, my data is being used and collected to personalize and offer me a better experience. Some retailers are augmenting that data with additional syndicated data sets and sources. And one of the things I encourage everyone to do, I encourage listeners on this podcast to do, I encourage my staff in the agency to do, is go on to any platform or any service that you do business with and do something called a data subject access request and see what data is held about you to make sure that you're comfortable with it and understand it. So yes, retailers and the like should do a better job of understanding and explaining it. But at the same time, we as consumers need to do a better job of also understanding what's going on, because the change that we need from a regulation, governance or use perspective will only come from an informed public that demands those changes.
Would it be safe to say that that's a question that right now wouldn't be a question that's being posed to the staff of X?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, X has got a whole lot of other problems beyond data use and collection.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting piece, right? Because there's a lot happening at the moment with what's happened with GARM and what's happening, and there's, Elon kind of taking on EU. Do you think that the US as a market will really protect its, citizens in regards to data and privacy and security in the vein that you would hope and that you're a champion of? Or do you think that it's still got a long way to go?
I'd like to say I'm an optimist, so I hope that they will get there. I think the major inflection point for the US to get there, and we've seen it reflected in a couple of, pieces of legislation that have got passed recently, is national security interests will drive thoughts around data use and collection and privacy. So we might not end up with an EU-like, GDPR offering, but we may end up with something that better protects individual rights from the thing that primarily concerns me is the abuse and misuse of data.
Yeah.
So if we end up with something in that direction, I would chalk that up as a partial win.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting timing here in Australia. The federal government is about to publish their recommendations for their privacy laws. It's imminent this week or next week. And as our IAB board member here in Australia, I know there is a lot of collaboration with the IAB in America and the UK and the rest of it. So I like you, Joshua, are optimistic around us finding a way to at least provide some framework at an industry level around making sure that consumers' data is protected, but also ensure that business can continue to function and the commercial requirements that are also thought of in a completely privacy compliant way.
Yeah. Like on the Australian side of things, I've been very close to those developments. So I might be an Australian who lives, thousands of miles away, but when I'm not on late night podcast calls, I'm a member of the regulatory working group of the Australian Direct Marketing Association. So I've been with them on calls with various regulators talking about both my experiences here in the US and Europe, but also helping to sort of advocate and drive, again, being optimistic, the privacy reforms that Australian citizens need and deserve, but in a way that also preserves a thriving information and digital advertising economy.
Because I was actually going to say, I think that's a really good point, a great segue, because you are still quite active as someone who's you've been living in the US. I think last time we spoke was about 11 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I like to say over a decade because it makes me look younger.
So you're still quite active here in the Australian market. You're on a number of boards and groups you've just spoken of. What are the big differences that you see in these two markets? And I ask that as maybe that's a selfish question, being someone who's running an ad tech company which is scaling, and I'm obviously experiencing going through the motions, let's say, of stepping into different markets. What has been your experience as an Australian, and what are the differences that you see between the US and Australia?
The easy, obvious one always is the scale difference. When I moved to the US, I brought my laptop with me from Australia, and I was like in my second week in the country, and I was typing away, and the letter I key just flew off the keyboard, and it had broken. And I was like, oh, great. Now, I need to get a new laptop or find a part. And I literally found a company in the US that sells individual keys for any model laptop that you need, and filled out a form, picked my model, and for $2, 3 days later, a replacement letter I key arrived. I just can't imagine that sort of model working in Australia. So the scale of the US is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. The US is ahead in a lot of areas when it comes to media and technology and the use of data, notwithstanding, your company, the time will come. But otherwise, all the big, great ad tech companies and media companies are based here. I think the big opportunity for Australian businesses is, I'm a firm believer in like Australians should get on a plane once a year and come and do a tour.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
You know, you think because it's digital, you can go to Facebook, you can like read the news and think you know what's going on, but get out here, get on the ground, meet with people, talk to. There's a lot of expat Australians here. Talk to us in person. We're normally very generous with our time. We want Australian companies to succeed, and you can find out and avoid. The great thing is you can avoid the mistakes that people have seen being made in the US. The other thing is, when I sit in the board of an Australian fintech, you can actually help Australian companies, and you can identify the best things you want to, beg, borrow, or steal to make your products better, and that can accelerate your development journey.
Okay.
Everyone here talks about us in the US. They talk about Australia as a great test market because it's English speaking and it's geographically isolated. You can do something there that no one would say. I will always say the inverse is true. The US is a great market for you to come and learn from and pick those things up, and you can be very successful in the Australian market. And then you can leverage that to go international.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've been working with, artificial intelligence and, machine learning for 8, 9, 10 years with our data program here at News Corp. But recently went over to the Ramp Up conference and spent a bit of time in what they're calling AI Valley there in San Francisco. And I couldn't agree more with what you said, Joshua. The learning that I got from 2 days on the road out there, and also, like you said, speaking to a couple of Australians that are sitting over there. One was Nick Chan, who's working with a business called Andy, which is an AI search client. Was just remarkable in terms of how much I took back to Australia in terms of the learning. So it's a really good point to make.
Okay, so we're going to just jump into a couple of quick fire questions. This is a speed round, and I know that you're a speed response man, so I'm looking forward to this. This is just to kind of soften things off at the end. So we always ask this because obviously Voodoo being a commerce media product and e-com and online, what was the last thing you bought online?
A video game.
A video game. And can we ask what the game was, the title?
Yeah, it was Sniper Elite 4 for the Switch.
Oh, wow. Okay. Key prediction, in the world of content commerce, what do you think the next 6 months or 12 months is going to look like? And what are we going to see? Because obviously you've got so much knowledge in regards to what's going on with customers at the center of your decision-making at Quad, which is fantastic. And also with your in-store connect, where does content commerce, how does that play a role? What are you going to see? What are we going to see?
What are we going to see? We're going to see creators building their own storefronts directly with brands. So co-branded creator storefronts.
Yeah, right. Very cool. So we're going to see some of those big creators like the Mr. Beast and things like that are going to branch into just going straight into kind of D2C, their own versions.
It's more than D2C. It'll be every creator, creators will be literally operating storefronts with curated products from retailers and brands.
Yeah. Building on that brand association, that brand affiliation and the brand love of that creator, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Word association. Retail.
Detail.
TikTok.
Problematic.
Credit card.
Points.
Video.
Games.
AI.
Humans.
Hello.
G'day.
Nice one. Fantastic.
Hey, Joshua, thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous. That was a really great, insightful session. We're so honoured to have you on our podcast. Thanks for joining us, particularly with the time difference. And we hope we can talk to you again sometime soon to follow up on how it's all gone with Quad.
Yeah, it was great to be here. I really appreciate the time. I'm humbled to be part of the podcast.
This is brilliant. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Commerce Media Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe. We're always on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of commerce media, ready to share the newest trends, insightful perspectives, and expert opinions with you. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep making media that matters. This podcast is executively produced and edited by Priya Tahazadeh, with co-producers Sandy Ho, Meg Lirish, and me, Rachel Fang. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Bidjigal, Gadigal, and Wurundjeri people, and we wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land.